Hello everyone, welcome to the class on diuretics. This is a continuous series part of congestive heart failure series. In the previous lectures, I have discussed about congestive heart failure pathophysiology, inotropic agents and renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system. In this video, I am going to explain about diuretics and their uses, nephron anatomy, epithelial cell physiology, drugs acting on nephron and various adverse effects of the drugs. Let's begin. Now, diuretics, the word is derived from Greek root dia and uresis. Now, dia is a very common root word which indicates passing through. Passing through, uresis means urine. That means the agents which will increase urine output are known as diuretics. This dia is also found in diabetes mellitus. In diabetes mellitus, diabetes means passing through the body, mellitus means sweet. That means in diabetes mellitus, sweet urine is passed out of the body. Now, coming to their uses, diuretics are widely used to treat congestive heart failure, hypertension and edema. In fact, to treat hypertension, the first choice of drugs are diuretics. Now, all diuretics will be acting on kidney. In the kidney, nephron is the functional unit. So, all these diuretics will act on various parts of that nephron. Now, coming to the kidney, kidney has got three primary functions. The first function is to remove water, electrolytes, metabolic waste and drugs. Again, the first function of the kidney is to remove water, electrolytes, metabolic waste and drugs. The second metabolic function is it reabsorbs whatever the water is required and electrolytes are required, because more than 99% of the filtrate will get reabsorbed, so that it has to maintain water and electrolytes. Otherwise, the body will be losing excessive water and electrolytes, which will cause dehydration and death also. So, the removal part is essential for removing metabolic waste and drugs, whereas reabsorb part is required for the survival of the life. Along with that, it has got one more endocrine function is there. In that endocrine function, kidney releases renin. Renin already we have discussed in the last class. Along with renin, it also releases erythropoietin. Erythropoietin is required for red blood cell formation. Now, along with this, the third one is it also releases calcitriol. Calcitriol is active form of vitamin D. In fact, vitamin D will get activated with hydroxylations. The final hydroxylation results in the active form, that is calcitriol, and that hydroxylation takes place in kidney. So this is the significance of kidney. Now, after that, as I told you, the main functional unit of kidney is nephron. Now, let us see brief things about nephron. Nephron anatomy. This is a brief diagram about nephron. Now, in nephron, the blood will be reaching to the nephron with the help of an artery known as efferent arteriole. Efferent arteriole takes the blood to that nephron, whereas efferent arteriole, the filtered blood will get into efferent arteriole. Now, all these blood vessels will form a network known as glomerulus. Now, the glomerulus will be held in an anatomical place known as glomerular capsule or Bowman capsule. Now, after that capsule, you have convolutions of tubule is there. The convolution is close to Bowman capsule, hence it is known as proximal convoluted tubule. Proximal means closeness. Now, after that, you have a hairpin loop is there. This is called as loop of Henle. Now, the one which is coming down is known as descending loop of Henle. The one which is going to the upward direction is known as ascending loop of Henle. After that, again you have a convolutions which is far away from Bowman capsule. Distal means far away or distance. It is known as distal convoluted tubule. Finally, all the urine will get collected in an anatomical region known as collecting tubule. So briefly, this is what is nephron anatomical parts. But observe this. The efferent arteriole will be moving close to this nephron, and this part is known as peritubular capillaries. Whatever the reabsorption occurs from the tubule, it gets into this peritubular capillaries. Look at the diagram. The B indicates reabsorption, whereas what needs to be excreted out is secreted from these blood vessels to the tubule, like metabolic waste and drugs. This is represented as C in the diagram. The other important thing, look at the diameters of these efferent and efferent arterioles. When you see efferent arteriole has got larger diameter than efferent arteriole, because of this difference in diameter, it generates a kind of 50 mm of Hg pressure, because the volume which is coming into this Bowman capsule is more because efferent arterial diameter is more, and the volume going out of this nephron is less because the efferent arterial diameter is less, and this increases pressure, and this pressure is what driving force for the filtration. Now moving further, now see, the entire nephron tubule cells are known as epithelial cells. Epithelial cells will make the entire tubule. The physiology of epithelial cell is important. Now this part is known as lumen. Lumen is the place where the urine forms. The urine will be formed here and goes out of from this lumen. The luminal side surface of this epithelial cells is known as luminal membrane, because it is on the luminal side. Whereas the side which is towards the body side is known as basement membrane or basolateral membrane. In some of the textbooks it is also known as interstitial side surface. Interstitial side surface. See, the space between epithelial cell and peritubular capillary is known as interstitial space, hence the surface is also known as interstitial surface or basolateral surface. They are used interchangeably. Now what you need to understand is, in the entire tubular region, all the epithelial cells contain a sodium-potassium pump at basolateral membrane side. That means towards the body side it has got sodium-potassium pump is there. Sodium-potassium pump, the job I have explained already. The mnemonic is NOKIA. That means sodium goes out, whereas potassium comes inside by using an ATP. Now it happens with the help of, like, 3 sodium goes out of the body, goes out of the cell, 2 potassium comes inside the cell by using 1 ATP. Now what happens with this? Whatever the sodium is there inside the epithelial cells will be reabsorbed into peritubular capillary, that is, it is getting into our blood. So this creates a kind of sodium gradient, which is the driving force to reabsorb sodium from this lumen. So this is the main driving principle. The entire epithelial cell basement membranes contains sodium-potassium pump, which acts as driving force. Whereas in luminal membrane side you have so many symport and antiport are there. Now symport, antiport are pumps. In case of symport, the pump will be moving both the ions to one direction. It is known as symport. Whereas antiports will be moving ions in different directions. Every region has got different kinds of symport and antiports. Let me give you a brief outline of these things. Now, in case of proximal convoluted tubule region, there is an antiport known as sodium proton antiport. Now, the job of this sodium proton antiport is, sodium will be reabsorbed into the body, whereas proton will be secreted into lumen. Because the ions are moving in opposite direction, it is known as antiport. Now remember, this antiport is present at proximal convoluted tubule. Now this antiport works well in presence of carbonic anhydrase enzyme. Now the job of this carbonic anhydrase enzyme is, this carbonic anhydrase enzyme generates a proton, and the proton is the one which is used by this antiport. If this enzyme is not working, the antiport cannot work because proton will not be generated. After that, in the loop of Henle, especially at ascending loop of Henle, there is a symport known as sodium, potassium, 2-chloride symport. That means the job of this symport is sodium, potassium, whereas chloride. All of them will be reabsorbed into the body. So the job of symport is to reabsorb all these ions. In case of distal convoluted tubule, you have sodium, chloride symport is there. Both of them will be reabsorbed into the body. In collecting tract, we have sodium channels are there. The job of sodium channel is again to reabsorb sodium into the body. Now what happens is, when sodium is getting reabsorbed in the lumen, the positive sodium is removed and it creates a kind of negative charge in the lumen. To neutralize that charge, body will be secreting either potassium or proton to this lumen. So any drug which is increasing the sodium amount at this collecting tract will cause potassium or proton loss. At the same time, at this junction we have aldosterone hormone is also there. Aldosterone is a mineralocorticoid which activates the sodium channel, and more amount of sodium and water is reabsorbed. So briefly, these are all the symports and antiports which are present at luminal side of the nephron. Whereas in case of basolateral membrane side, in everywhere we have sodium potassium pump is there. Moving further, see again with everything, this diagram explains all the drugs and the regions. Now it starts with the glomerulus, filtration starts here. Now at this zone, carbonic anhydrase and sodium proton antiport is there. As I told you, this one works with the help of carbonic anhydrase enzyme. If you inhibit this enzyme, proton will not be formed. Now with the help of this proton, sodium and bicarbonate will be reabsorbed into the body. When you inhibit this enzyme, that sodium and bicarbonate will be secreted, will be going out of the body, because when this pump is not working, absorption of sodium bicarbonate will not take place. So when you inhibit that, they will be going out of the body. So at this proximal convoluted tubule, carbonic anhydrase inhibitor drugs will act and they cause secretion of sodium bicarbonate. Now after that, at this loop of Henle, loop diuretics will act. I told you at this loop you have sodium potassium chloride, Symport is there. Loop diuretics will inhibit this pump and cause the secretion of sodium, potassium and chloride. Similarly, in distal convoluted tubule, thiazide diuretics will act, which will inhibit the import of sodium and chloride. Once it is inhibited, sodium chloride will not be reabsorbed, rather they will be going out of the body. Finally, potassium sparing diuretic, I explained this one. At this collecting duct, sodium will be reabsorbed, which creates a negative pressure inside the lumen. To neutralize that, potassium and proton will be going into the lumen. So when you inhibit this particular sodium channel, sodium will not be reabsorbed. So there will be no negative charge, so potassium will not go out of the lumen. So what are you doing? You are saving potassium. Saving is nothing but sparing, hence they are known as potassium sparing diuretics. Similarly, aldosterone job is to activate these sodium channels. If you inhibit that, sodium will not be reabsorbed, rather it will be going out of the body. So finally it goes out as urine excretion. Now the other important fact is, look at this. Sodium 65 to 70% will be reabsorbed at proximal convoluted tubule. 25% will be reabsorbed at thick ascending loop of Henle, whereas 5% will be reabsorbed at distal convoluted tubule. So this is briefly about the drugs and their mechanism of action. Moving further, this is a little more detailed diagram. Look at this. The same things are explained. So carbonic anhydrase enzyme inhibitors are acetazolamide, brinzolamide and torzolamide. These diuretics are mild diuretics. They cannot be used to cause diuresis, rather they are used to treat mountain sickness and epilepsy. The reason is they are self-limiting. Self-limiting means because they inhibit, they cause secretion of bicarbonate, sodium and bicarbonate. The excessive loss of bicarbonate will automatically inhibit carbonic anhydrase enzyme. So after some time the enzyme will not work. If the enzyme is not working, drugs cannot work. Hence they are known as self-limiting. They are usually not used as diuretics. After that you have osmotic diuretics are there, mannitol and isosorbate. As the name indicates, they act by the principle of osmosis. When these drugs are taken, they will get into the tubule. They increase osmotic gradient of this tubule. Because osmotic gradient is increased, water will also be taken into the tubule and it goes out of the body. Hence they are known as osmotic diuretics. After that you have sodium potassium 2-chloride. Symporter is also known as co-transporter. Loop diuretics will be acting here. Furosemide, torsemide, bumetamide like drugs. Now any defect in this co-transporter results in Bartter syndrome. Now after that you have thiazide diuretics are there. Hydrochlorothiazide, thiazide kind of drugs. They inhibit sodium chloride co-transporter. Any defect in this co-transporter result in Gitelman syndrome. Now finally epithelial sodium channel will get transported. They are also known as potassium sparing diuretic. Any defect in this channel results in Liddle syndrome. Now this potassium sparing, you have two classes are there. One of the class will be inhibiting only the sodium channel. The other one will act as antagonist of aldosterone. So antagonist of aldosterone drugs, spironolactone, eplerenone, whereas sodium channel inhibitors are amilorate, triamterene. Now this is important feature. See, just juxtaglomerular apparatus, I have explained it in RAS system. What happens is, see, the combination of these cells, efferent arterioles, granular cells and this ascending loop of Henle forms a particular cell types known as juxtaglomerular apparatus. Whenever sodium chloride is losing too much from this nephron, it is sensed by macular denser cell and it sends a signal to granular cells which releases renin. The job of renin, it immediately acts on this efferent arteriole and cause vasoconstriction. When vasoconstriction is there, the excretion will get reduced. That means urinary excretion is reduced. This is to save water loss from the body, because too much of sodium chloride going out means from here body is losing too much of water. To avoid that, renin is released. This is how it acts. Next one, there is a brief description about the entire thing. See the first class, acetazolamide are carbonic anhydrase inhibitors. They inhibit carbonic anhydrase in proximal convoluted tubule. They increase the excretion of sodium and bicarbonate. Potassium loss will be there because at collecting duct, the loss of the excretion of sodium, the excreted sodium will get reabsorbed and it is exchanged with the potassium. Potassium will be going out. Hence it causes hypokalemia. Hypo means less, kalium means potassium, emia means blood. It results in decreased levels of potassium in blood. Now it causes acidosis. Understand this one. Bicarbonate is a conjugate base. When body is losing excess amount of base, inside the body acid levels increases because the balancing base is going out. Hence it causes acidosis. Metabolic acidosis or blood pH increases. Next class, loop diuretics. In loop diuretics, the important drugs are ethacrynic acid, furosemide, torsemide. They inhibit sodium, potassium, 2-chloride co-transporter or symporter in thick ascending loop. They cause sodium, potassium and chloride loss. Now along with that, calcium and magnesium excretion also occurs. Why it occurs is, see, 2 of the chlorides, see here, 2 chlorides will be going through the lumen. So what happens is when they are going out of the body, they increase positive potential of the lumen, and that is what causes calcium and magnesium excretion too. So loop diuretics are also known as high ceiling diuretics because they cause high amounts of diuresis. They are widely used to treat acute pulmonary conditions and congestive heart failure kind of serious cases. But the problem is loop diuretics also cause ototoxicity. Hearing impairment occurs because of this loop diuretics. Now moving further, next thiazide diuretics, thiazides. Thiazide diuretics, the name is because of a particular ring. Hydrochlorothiazide is a thiazide diuretic, whereas indapamide and chlorthalidone are known as thiazide-like diuretics. They do not have thiazide structure, but they act in the similar space. At distal convoluted tubule, they inhibit sodium chloride co-transporter. Because of mechanism of action, they are known as thiazide-like diuretics. Now this thiazide-like diuretics has got high T-half. Hence they are preferred. It means one drug per day is enough. That is the reason why these drugs are preferred nowadays than thiazide diuretics. Now they cause sodium chloride loss, along with that potassium, calcium also there. Now observe this, both these loop and thiazides will cause alkalosis. The reason is, as I told you, at collecting tract, when sodium is going too much, it is reabsorbed into the body. Either it causes loss of potassium or a proton. Loss of potassium, hypokalemia. Loss of proton means acid is going out of the body. When acid is going out of the body, the counterpart base is increasing in the body, hence it causes alkalosis. Understand the difference. Acetazolamide will cause acidosis, whereas loop and thiazides will cause alkalosis. Now the final class, amiloride, triamterene are sodium channel inhibitors, whereas spironolactone, eplerenone are mineralocorticoid receptor antagonists. Now they does the same thing. They cause sodium loss, but it is very small. The important thing is they save potassium. That's why they are known as potassium sparing. Potassium sparing. Again, they cause acidosis. Why acidosis? Because they are retaining potassium as well as proton. When proton is retained inside the body, it causes acidosis. Now the important thing is spironolactone has got an active metabolite known as canrenone. Active metabolite means it also shows action. Hence the dose need to be adjusted because it will have long-term actions. The other thing with spironolactone is because it is a kind of androgen receptor antagonist. It causes gynecomastia, and it may cause impotence too. Hence nowadays this drug is replaced with eplerenone. So this is about diuretics. Thank you for watching this video.